I'm Lyndsey Smith with Real Agriculture, and joining me now, it's Jenna Gregoire, area agronomist near North Battleford, Saskatchewan. Jenna, how are you?
I am good, Lindsay. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It has finally warmed up where I am. Um, how are things where you are? I think it's the opposite.
Yeah, well, we had another frost scare last night. So, I mean, probably not quite as warm as what
Mhm.
you're experiencing there, but the temperatures are starting to warm up for today. I want to say it's almost 20 degrees. So, I mean, we've really had a big swing going from 2 degrees to 20 in about 6 hours here. So, yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we're dealing with up in West Saskatchewan.
Now, okay, so very cool to cold. Um, and this is of course early June, but this is not the first frost since sort of spring has sprung. So what does that mean for the crop that might be emerged out there?
It's really a mixed bag. So we had some guys who were seeding canola the end of April, beginning of May, and yep, they had a frost about that May 10th-ish, May 15th-ish up in there, and there was definitely some frost damage. There was some reseeding that had to happen, and then of course, we waited the allotted time, seeing if that new leaf was coming again, and in a lot of cases it was. And now it's kind of getting hit for a second time. So there's definitely no lack of stressors on our plants out there. And then you kind of mix that in with drought conditions in a large portion of my territory, and you can definitely see that things are struggling a bit out there.
Absolutely. So we've also heard and seen, smoke cover from the wildfires as well. And as you mentioned, very dry conditions in many parts of the prairies and specifically Saskatchewan. We are hearing, and for different reasons, but there's been for many farmers delayed emergence for some of their crops. So seed is in, but it's not necessarily coming up out of the ground. For your area, of course, it's a lack of moisture. What do we think about when we think about, that delay in emergence?
Well, of course, everybody gets really anxious, right? June hits and everybody thinks, oh, I should be in crop spraying. But we're going to have to kind of take a seat and wait a little bit and give those plants a chance to hopefully have a rain shower to get things going. And if there is no rain that comes, I mean, that may be a totally different conversation. But the other issue that comes up is that a lot of these guys seeded still earlier in May, and a lot of seed treatments. I mean, your coverage is about 35 days, right?
Yeah.
So it's just another thing for growers to be mindful of because as it does come out of the ground, you may want to take a closer look on it, make sure that there is no insect feeding on that because you might be at the tail end of your protection there.
hmm Definitely a consideration if it sits. Now, is there a difference? It's sitting in, let's say, dry soil. Is there a difference if it's warm and dry or cool and dry, or do we still sort of use that 35 days-ish as our window where we can count on that protection?
35 days is what you will see if you read the policy. So 35 days is what we go from. As soon as it goes in the ground, doesn't matter if it's hot and dry or if it's wet and cool, 35 days is what you can kind of expect. I mean, in different conditions, of course, you might see a little bit more, but it doesn't really matter because you have to kind of make a line in the sand, and that line in the sand is 35 days.
Yep. Okay. So that is helpful. And it does mean, certainly for those fields, it might mean more careful scouting early on to anticipate potentially some of those issues that could pick up. Um, so certainly a concern. You did mention though, wanting to maybe get out there and get those herbicides on something like a stressed crop, like one that's perhaps just been through a light frost, even if it is light. Um, what if, do you delay in that sense? What if the weeds did get some moisture and are germinated and are growing? I know this is a tough call that a lot of farmers have to make.
Yep. So that is absolutely the question of the week. Of course, you combat that with probably hurricane force winds that we've had for the last week. And today is really the first day that the winds have calmed down. So even though there was a frost, everybody's calling and saying, I need to spray, I need to spray. And my question back to them is saying, do you really need to spray or do you just think you need to spray because it's the first nice day that we've had?
Yeah.
In all these situations, because it was so cold last night, I mean, those plants are going to start to shut down and they won't uptake the chemical as good as if it was a warmer day outside, of course. So unless they are at the opposite, they're getting to the end of their staging on that crop, my recommendation definitely would be to wait because nobody likes throwing money into the wind. And that's kind of what you'll be doing if you spray too quickly after a frost. And, if there is a chance, and maybe there is a chance in some spots that there could be a shower floating through, I mean, something like that will definitely just help that crop. And the less stress that you can put on it, definitely the better. So my question would be, do you actually have to spray or are you wanting to spray? And if you can delay, that little extra time will really make a big difference on that crop.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and it's important to think about, obviously from the crop's perspective, you don't want to add a stress, as you mentioned. But those weeds, they went through that cold temperature as well, and we want them to be actively gearing up and growing to take in that herbicide so it's actually the most effective. So really important, I think. And it's a really good question. Do you have to or do you feel you should?
Right.
Because yes, it can be hard when there's a lot of acres to cover to be patient, but sometimes patience pays, that's for sure. Okay, now, of course, in this next week, I do hope that it rains where you are, Jenna. And if I could send it to you, I would. But what will you be scouting for over the next week?
The next week, we're keeping an eye on flea beetles, especially after a frost. You tend to see them attracted to those canola plants a lot more. So I'm definitely keeping a really close eye on flea beetles for the area. And then the other thing is just overall emergence, really trying to assess plant stand and see if there was any misses. The favorite thing for a lot of farmers to do is to call me, the end of July, beginning of August, and saying, "Oh, I got a miss here. What happened?" And it's pretty impossible to try and figure that out when it's 2 months after the fact. So anything like that, just trying to keep an eye on to see how even the plant stand is out there.
It's a very excellent point. Get out there now so that you can help identify, was it a seeding issue? Was it an insect issue? Better to look now. Absolutely. All right. Jenna with Pioneer Seeds Canada, thank you so much for joining me here on the show.
Thanks, Lyndsey. It was great.